Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Midlife Muscle and Strength Podcast. I'm Mickey Kilmartin.
And I'm JP Vionsek.
JP, you know that I can't not say something about that festive shirt you have there.
Yeah, for the viewers who can't see, what does it look like, Mickey?
That looks pretty, looks like you got the Grinch everywhere. Are you a Grinchy during the holidays?
I'm not. I just have like maybe a collection of 10 holiday Christmas sweaters. So the only time I wear them is December. So I just kind of go through the gauntlet. And today you got the Grinch.
I love it. Yeah, I didn't really wear my festive Grinch stuff. I got shout out Liz Malika Photography, my friend,
Nice,
who I've worked with in the past.
That's a good logo.
Yeah, she got a cool logo.
Yeah.
Does great work. If you ever need, if you're ever in the Boston area, she does it all. Give her a follow, tag, whatever. Check her out. She's photographer extraordinaire. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics there ever was. That's plyometrics. If you've ever seen The Grinch, he didn't do many plyometrics. He's pretty slow, not too twitchy or bouncy.
Those calves.
He's got stick legs.
Yeah.
And a big belly, which doesn't help you plyometrics. But I'm going to let you actually take the lead, even though this is like one of my favorite things to talk about, because you've got a series of questions you're going to hit me with, and we'll kind of roll with it and talk about it, and maybe even debate some things if we don't agree on all topics.
That's
plyometrics. So we'll kind of call this a plyometrics FAQ 101.
We kind of came up with this topic. We talk about plyometrics a lot off air, and I just think it's misunderstood by a lot of people, and I don't think people apply it properly. And maybe if you're an athlete, you kind of have some practical, but I think like fitness in general, I think there's a lot to take from plyometrics. I think for general health as well, and I think people are missing that aspect. They're just, you see popular right now is like, walking with weighted vests or strength training is really big. But I think people are missing out on a lot of like connective tissue and a lot of longevity benefits from doing plyometrics and durability. So I think it's going to be an up and coming topic. And if you're not doing it, you should be. And these are some questions you might want to ask before you start, or maybe you're, want to learn more about plyometrics. So
I like all those things. And I also, to add to that, the rise of the hybrid athlete, the strength / I guess their endurance is their big thing. Like I do marathons and I deadlift. It's like what they all hang their hat on. But I see very few hybrid athletes doing any sort of plyometric work other than their distance running, which is debatable as far as plyometric goes, even though you could say running is plyometrics. But yeah, I think it's missing piece for a lot of people and very misunderstood piece for many people. And that might be why they don't include it.
Yep. I think they're misunderstood and not understanding how to implement it. So we'll kind of go through some questions here. So when we first start, let's start with what is plyometric training in just simple terms. How would you describe it to someone?
All right. If I had to describe plyometrics, and if you go to the encyclopedia, you're going to be like, well, that's not what it really says. To me, plyometrics is training the application of force as an athlete, like to the ground. So how do you, strike the ground with your feet to either sprint faster or jump higher? So that, if I was going to sum it up, that's what I would say. I'd say, how do you apply force into the ground? That's the plyometric, like 101, I guess you could say. And again, if you went and looked at like Russian textbooks or something, that might not be the definition. But when I think of plyometrics, I'm thinking of applying force into the ground quickly, right? Because a squat is applying force into the ground, but it's a very slow, right? There's no plyometric where you keep your feet on the ground that long, like you would with the back squat. So that's my definition.
Yeah, and maybe a visual or something to think about, like a running back planting their foot into the ground. I thought this was always amazing because I was always lifting weights and, had a 400, 500-pound back squat. But then they plant their foot into the ground, and for obviously not as long, but a millisecond of time, it's like 1,000 pounds of force going through their leg. Even gymnasts, I thought it was crazy. Like, Simone Biles does a vault and lands, and it's like 2,000 pounds of
Yeah.
force she's absorbing. So
Hmm.
if you think about it like that, like that's what kind of plyometrics is, like
Yeah.
absorbing force
Um,
through your body and using the ground as like that reaction force.
yeah.
It's you don't wear into lifting weights, and I think lifting weights is important. You need we'll talk about it, but yeah, I think like there's so much benefit from that.
Yeah, there's a really cool diagram. There's a bunch of them, but there's, if you can find one, you Google one for yourself. Diagram of a sprinter, like an Olympic sprinter, and they have them in as they're sprinting, and they point to all the different parts of their body and the amount of force that like your soleus muscles absorbing or your Achilles, all these things that are happening when you full out sprint, and the forces that you encounter are insane, like throughout your body, and they just can't be replicated in almost any way other than just by sprinting or doing plyometric work.
Next one we have is who should and who shouldn't be doing plyometrics.
I mean, if you've ever listened to this show, you know that I think everybody should be doing plyometrics, no matter what age. To what degree and to what scale, that's obviously going to be adjusted and change over time, the older or younger you are. But I think everyone would benefit from some kind of plyometrics.
Yeah, it's funny to watch like our kids grow up, and like my daughter will jump off like a 4 or 5 foot like platform and land,
Yeah.
and like that's how she's developing her leg strength. And like I don't stop her. I mean, sometimes it's too high, but she's like landing and absorbing it, and that's how her strength is. I think the argument is for I don't know, geriatric seniors. Would you have someone who is in their 60s, or do you have someone right now in their 60s doing plyometrics who
Uh,
doesn't do it, or how, like, what do you think? I think that when people think plyometrics, they're like, oh, when I get to a certain age, I'm not doing plyometrics anymore.
so my take on that, and it differs from some people, because I've been to conferences before, like 4 athletes and 4 strength and conditioning coaches, and one of the head people, and I'm not going to say their name because I think he's a very smart guy, a very successful guy, but he was like, you shouldn't sprint or do certain things after a certain age. He has like a very hard, like, no, like risk versus reward, not worth it. I am on the other side of that argument, or other side of the fence, where I think you should jump and try to run at a high speed if possible, like within reason, and do some low end plyometrics for as long as you can. Whether that means just doing little pogo hops if you're 75 years old or 80 years old, just little, repetitive rhythmic pogo hops, and maybe some like seated jumps or seated low box jumps, anything that you can do to stay a little bit bouncier and keep those type 2 muscle fibers alive and going, because it's a use it or lose it type situation. I think you should do. Doing an all out sprint when you're 80 years old, first of all, yes, there's a massive amount of risk. And there's a massive amount of risk if you're 40, like us, doing an all out sprint, right? There is risk across the board. But I think trying to run as fast as you can, or as close as possible in the 80 to 90% range, is a good thing if you're able, and you have a situation where you can do it. Like I wouldn't say right now in New Hampshire with an inch of snow on the road out there, if you're 80, to go, hey, go take a quick couple of laps and try to sprint. But if you've got a place where you can do that and do a little bit of running, maybe not at top speed, I don't see a problem with that. I think there's more benefits than risks, honestly, in my opinion.
I would agree with the expert. He said you shouldn't do that. I think there's a risk reward. If you're in your 60s and you're going to blow out, I think it's your training history. Like we talk about, it's all situational. But if you've been doing it, like for your case, I'd be like, yeah, keep doing it. You've been doing it, keep going. But if you have a 10-year gap in your training of like, I just had a desk, I wouldn't necessarily like. I do agree with like the small pogo hops and things like that. Like you should do some things. I think jumping is good for like maybe on a certain surface, like really padded or small trampoline. I think that stuff's great, but I wouldn't necessarily. And maybe you build into it. Like maybe if you haven't done it for a while, it's a slow progression. But yeah, maybe I don't know. I go back and
We can
forth.
talk about the build into it thing, I think,
Yeah.
later, because I think that those points are valid in terms of don't get off the couch and go do
Correct.
that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But
I think that goes for everyone though, no matter where you are.
yeah, no matter where you are age wise, yes, for sure.
How often should plyometric training be done per week?
I like dosing throughout the week. And I want to say micro dose, like do 5 jumps a day. But I think sprinkle throughout your week 2 to 3 times, so that you're getting a steady dose of it rather than once a week, if it fits into your schedule and if you're recovering well, which we'll talk about later. But I think 3 times a week, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with some days in between, also with varying intensity. I wouldn't say 100% high intensity plyometrics 3 times a week is a good idea. But I think if you use various levels of plyometrics and types throughout the week, you could definitely do it 3 times a week and see benefits and also not be overtrained, um, and keep a steady dose rather than like once every 7 days. I think that's actually probably riskier in my opinion if you're because then you're going to try to fit everything in that one day rather than just have different intensities and different doses throughout the week. I'm doing it all on Mondays and then not again until the next Monday. So you'll have a tendency to go too far probably in that sort of situation.
Yeah, it's funny. I think people get this wrong a lot because they look at plyometrics as like abs. Like I'm going to do abs. Like it's always a separate block of like plyometrics, and they're like, oh, I don't have time for that. I'll do it once a week, and it kind of turns into like once every 2 weeks. You don't really see any benefits from it. Like it should be incorporated within your program, like you're saying. It shouldn't be like this like separate entity. And I think a lot of people like do my cardio, and then I do my strength, and then I do abs, and then I'll do my plyometrics. Like it's like this separate block, which I think it should be collaborated in. I just don't think people, and we could talk about this a little later, but like plyometrics, the way they feel is like, is this really doing anything? like, like I just jumped a little bit. Like it doesn't feel the same as like lifting or cardio. Like there's definitely a response, or even core. Like you do abs, you're like, oh, my abs are burning. I'm doing something. Like plyometrics are like, okay, like great. Like
Whoop-de-doo.
what should that feel like? Like it's just like I think people kind of push it to the wayside, which I think they should be like pulling it towards them and doing it, incorporating it within the strength. You know, you talk about all the time, like, okay, let's do, you know, some broad jumps, deadlift some broad jumps, or you can mix them in a little bit. I think like following a program with plyometrics blended in is a great combination.
Yeah, and like the caveat to that, or the asterisk, I guess you could say, is if you can only get one day in, I'd say, yeah, definitely do the one day. If your schedule's just crazy and it's like, all right, I can only do it this one day, by all means, do something rather than nothing. And depending on what you train or how you train, for example, I train some CrossFitters who they have one day that I call athletic day, where they do sort of a specific circuit of that stuff because they just have so much volume and other things on their plate that there's really no room to add it in where it wouldn't be a detriment. So we just keep it with the one day because I don't want it to detract from everything else. And it's really not a hyper focus for them. It's just to keep it there, and to maintain it rather than to build on it a ton, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's some, you know, I think even within the CrossFit program, there's plyometrics, not specifically plyometrics, but whether that's lifting or, you know, Olympic lifting quickly or double unders or box jumps.
Take double unders, like sneaky
Yeah.
plyometric.
So like it's not like they're not doing it other days a week. It's just like, hey, let's have that one focus day of, you know, athletic movement.
Exactly.
What do you need? Do you need a strength base before starting plyometrics? What do you think about like?
It's ideal.
You're starting a program. You're new to lifting, and should you be get your strength up first and then add plyometrics in, or should it be something you're doing together?
I think it's ideal to have a strength base when doing plyometrics, but you can build them both together the same, where you can have a linear progression, like progressive overload with preparing your body to lift heavier loads and preparing your body to do more higher intensity plyometrics. Like we just were talking about previously, you should not get off the couch and go do 100% sprint. You wouldn't get off the couch and do a 100% back squat max without having done some strength work preparing to do that over time, right? So the approach should be the same. You should be building over the course of like a planned series of of phases and blocks to get to the point where you're doing the highest intensity, highest level plyometrics. But you can tie those two things together where you're like, I haven't trained in 5 years, but I want to lift and have some plyometrics. You could definitely do both. I wouldn't say you have to do strength for a month and then you can add in plyometrics, because the strength helps the plyometrics, but they are kind of separate entities in the sense that just because you're squatting right now doesn't mean that your ligaments, tendons, joints are feeling prepared to do plyometrics now just because you were squatting. Because like we talked about, the forces are much different, and how they're applied are much different when you are lifting weights versus when you're doing plyometrics. So I think, yes, to answer your question, you need strength base and you can build both at the same time. You don't have to do one then the other.
Yeah. I think like prepping your body, going through like a little prep phase, I think is important. This dives into a little bit deeper, but like maybe some isometrics.
Yes.
The way we've talked about that before. Our friend Fred Duncan is a big
shout out Fred.
Yeah, so I think the isometric training would be a great kind of blend there, and then like you said, I think you could definitely do it together in the right dosage. Yeah, and I think the dosages, we'll talk about it if we don't get to it, but I think that's what people struggle with as well. What's the difference between low-level plyometrics and high-level plyometrics?
So, I mean, the highest level, if you're making a pyramid is all-out sprint, right? That is the pinnacle, right? You get toes on the line, 3-point stance, fast as you can for 50 to 100 yards. That's as intense of a plyometric you're going to get. And if you do that, you'll know what I mean. If you really sprint it all out, you will know what that feels like. And then from there, it goes to things like you have depth jumps and drop jumps, things like that, where you're dropping from a high point and absorbing the force and trying to jump as high as possible, like standing triple jumps. Those are all things that are high-end plyometrics because the amount of force that you are applying and absorbing is very high. A low-end plyometric would just be like pogo hops, jump roping, doing like deep tier squat hops or deep tier lunge hops, things that it's not super intense. It's more of a like 60 to 70% intensity. And it's like what I would call you're training your plyometrics and you're building resilience in the tendons and ligaments and in your body. Learn to be more rhythmic with how you apply force into the ground. So high-end sprints, depth jumps, drop jumps, and like single leg broad jumps, etc., bounding, that's really high-end. And then you have low-end would be like pogos, deep tier stuff, because it's not as intense, not as high of force of application into the ground.
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit on the height that you're jumping, or is it?
Yeah, so
I know it's not, that doesn't cover all the exercises. But.
Yeah, so there's the list is long. There's a lot of different things you could say qualify as high intensity or low intensity, but what I would say is like amount of time on the ground. First of all, like the more force you're trying to apply into the ground quicker, that's going to be a higher intensity plyometric. Like when you're sprinting, you're trying to slam into the ground with your foot as hard as you can and apply as much force to push yourself forward as possible. Same thing with a depth jump or a drop jump, more so a drop jump. But with a pogo, you are doing that, but it's not as intense. Like you're not trying to jump as high as possible. You're just trying to find a rhythm where you're just bouncing off of the ground. The deep tier squat, yeah, you're on the ground. Your ground contact time is longer, but you're still kind of bouncing up and down and rhythmically applying force into the ground. It's just not as hard where you feel that pop into the ground. Yep. If that makes sense.
Yep. How many total jumps or ground contacts should be done in a training session? So like what's the dose?
So that question is a perfect segue from what we just talked about, because the higher the intensity of the plyometric, the lower the dose. Like I don't do more than, I would say 15 to 20 like depth or drop jumps in a session is as many as you'd want to do once a week, maybe twice if you have a big separation, like 4 days, 5 days between the two. So higher intensity stuff, I'd say 15 to 20 maybe 25 at the most if you're really well trained and you're someone who's experienced with it. With low end,
if you're just starting out though, it could be like 10.
yeah, you could just do 10, like 10 drop jumps or 10 depth jumps. I mean, if you do it with 100% intent and intensity, that's more than enough. You will feel that for sure the next day. And then the low end stuff, within a week, you could do 50 to 100 repetitions. Like you could do deep tier lunge hops. You could do like 30 aside in one session. That's 60 in a day, right? And you could wait a few days and do some low, like deep tier squat hops and do like 50. Yeah. And you're already at like 100 plus because the intensity is much lower. And that's actually a good thing, is to build some volume in that, because you're building volume that's creating strength in your ankles, your knees, your tendons, your ligaments. So they're more resilient to the hard or high end stuff that you're doing in a smaller dose throughout the week. So,
and do you separate your training into like, okay, this is a low day, this is a high day, or is it like some low stuff with high stuff?
I like to use low stuff as a warm up anytime I'm going to do high end stuff. But I won't do a ton of volume of the low end stuff on a day. I'm going to go high. And then if there's no high end stuff, I will do more of the low. I tend to separate them like in terms of the focus of what I'm doing, just because it's my own sort of for my own self. If I try to do all of it each time I do plyometrics, I'm going to go too far. So I got to be like, okay, today's a high day, get it in. And then today will be a low day, so I can scratch that itch. I'm getting plyometrics, but it's a low end, so I don't have to worry about the intensity too much. Mm-hmm. And it helps recovery, etc. between. But
yeah, I think that's I think people get the dosage wrong.
Yeah, the dose is
like one whole session of just plyometrics, like we talked about. Like it's just like, okay, I'm going to do abs and then plyos, and it's like they just go crazy one day, and then they're like destroyed, or it wasn't enjoyable, or like, you know, it's they go nuts with it.
Yeah, if you did like 100 depth jumps, I don't know if you drop from 24 to 36 inches for each of those jumps, like the amount of force that is, 100 of those would be rough. Like you're gonna feel your ankles, your knees, even if you're in shape, young, it doesn't really matter. That's gonna
almost goes to the joint health at that point.
Yeah, you're gonna go backwards. It's gonna be, you're gonna need a long time to recover from that. All you need is, like, you wouldn't put 90 to 100% on the barbell and be like, I'm gonna do 100 deadlifts, but they're just singles. Okay, like if you did 100 of them, it's still gonna wreck you. So I think people need to equate those things together, because they don't look at it the same as like weight training, because you don't see 6 plates on the side, right? But it's the forces involved are similar, if not more. So you've got to give it the respect it's due in terms of the dose and the volume.
Yeah, I just don't think people have that correlation of like, that is like doing a 200 plus pound squat like 100 times, like, yeah, or it's like a 300 pound squat. You know, it's like take your body weight times whatever gravity is, and like that's the landing force. You know, mm-hmm. People don't look at it like that. It's only for a second, but it's like, hey, that's just as good as, or just as, beneficial as going to squat 3 plates on the bar.
Yeah,
a bunch of times. What surface are like safest for plyometric training? I know I've seen your gym. You got some kid mats, some mats you jump on. What do you use those mats? What surface do you have in your gym? Like,
I mean, ideally, if you had a turf field or a nice grass field, that's the best, because it gives you some cushion. If you can get outside, the weather's nice, it's not freezing like it is here in New Hampshire. Get outside and use just regular ground, like, grass or a yard or a field or a turf field if you got one. If you're really trying to hit a high intensity plyometric day, like the good old fashioned horse stall mats that you have in the regular CrossFit gyms, those rubber flooring, that's fine, because you're really trying to apply force into the ground, and you don't actually want to soften it. You don't want it, because you're blunting the forces that you're dealing with there. But if you are older or just getting back into plyometrics, I think those gymnastic mats are great, because they're squishy. They have a lot of give. They're kinder to the joints, kinder to your body in general. But if you're an athlete training to get better, like really, really better at plyometrics, I want to jump higher, I want to run faster, and you're doing high intensity plyometrics, a stiffer surface is better. I wouldn't say do it on pavement, but like a gym floor, or an actual playing field that you're going to use. Like if you're a basketball player, using a basketball court. If you're a soccer player, a field that you would play soccer on. If you play tennis, practice like you play. And if you're going to be doing plyometrics, find a surface that's similar to what you're playing. But if you're just doing it to stay generally healthy, a little bit of a softer surface is probably a good idea, just to be kinder to the body.
And then shoes wise, do you think like, does it go the same? Like, okay, if you're generally training, is it good to have squishy shoes? Like, I'm not saying like big pillows, but like,
You don't want to do Hoka shoes on depth jumps.
trampolines. You want to kind of have a little softer shoe, or like, again, like if you're a high end athlete looking for like power output, are you looking for like minimal padding?
Yeah, I think like a good cross trainer, like I know we had our shoe episode, a shoe that's got a I don't want to say minimalist, like the no sole shoe, but if you're an athlete trained to be better at your sport, you don't want to do it in like a big heavy running shoe. You don't want to do plyometrics because you're just stunting all those forces and softening the forces with because that's what they're made for, the running shoes, to soften the blow of running on hard surfaces. So smaller sole, not a huge heel lift in the shoe. That's ideal. And then if you're just generally doing it for fitness, a basic running shoe, like New Balance has a lot of shoes that are basic running shoes that have a decent sole that's kind of soft. That's a good one that you could use, and it's going to help you not overdo it on the forces in your feet, ankles, knees, hips, and all that.
Yep.
You wearing your New Balances right now?
I'm not wearing them right now, but I do wear New Balances.
Those clouds, baby. They're clouds, baby.
Very comfortable. How do you know if your body's recovering well from plyometrics? So you're going through like a circuit and it's like, hey, am I doing because I think there's an individual, it's tough to be like, this is what everyone should do for plyometrics because it's so individualized, or at least it should be for a program. It should be very cookie cutter because I think everyone, absorbs force differently, has strengths and weaknesses. Training, we talk about training volume, but like, what should people look out for? Be like, I don't know if I should take the day off from plyometrics, or maybe I could add another day if I'm not feeling it too bad.
Well, let me ask you real quick. It's a while back now, but when we started getting into our conversations about plyometrics, when I started to take the deep dive, and you're like, send me some stuff, or like, what are some ideas? And you started adding it back in. What did you notice like right away? The first few weeks you started putting plyometrics in? Because I remember you talking about this on the show a bit, and just in our conversation.
It's just a different feel than, first of all, like I have a broken big toe. So like that's something that like dictates how much jumping I do.
Regulates your volume for you.
Yeah, regulates my volume. Because I just like, it hurts. And then it's just like it's like the central nervous system feel. It's like, you just feel like, I don't have any pop today, or like, it's not a soreness. Like I'm used to like, wow, my quads or glutes are sore. And it's like, you don't get sore, but it's like, you just don't feel like you could jump as high. I don't know. It's like
you don't feel, I think I like what you said, pop. Like you don't have pop.
Yeah, just like,
you don't feel springy.
Yeah. It's just like my legs are tired, but it's a different tired than like squatting or.
Yeah. The reason I ask you is because like that's what when I warm up, like I think you have to have first off, when you're doing plyometrics in your training, like you really need to warm up well. Like that's a super important part of a plyometric, session. If you just jump into plyos and you're not warmed up, like that's a recipe for disaster. But when I'm doing my warm up, I will feel like my body. I'll be like, all right, do I feel bouncy? Do I feel hoppy today? And that might tell me no plyos today, or low end plyos today, if I am going to do any, rather than push when I know that the bounce isn't there, or the springiness isn't there. Because that I try to read myself and like listen to my body. Now, if you're not in tune with your body like I am, because I've been doing this for too long, and you just want someone to write down on paper and tell you what to do, like the recovery aspect, I think you should be taking at least 48 hours off between any plyometric session. That's like a minimum, in my opinion.
From
Um,
plyometrics totally. Sorry, just to clarify, from plyometrics totally, or lifting, or just
Great question. You can lift in between, but plyometrics, like I think 2 days off between any, not even high intensity, any planned plyometrics where you are doing sets and reps. Uh, you should take 48 hours off between to let your body recover. Because even if it doesn't feel sore, like you said, like you just squatted super heavy, your CNS and everything else is fatigued. And your body just needs that recovery time so that the next time you do plyometrics, it's actually useful. Because if you're doing plyometrics when you're not fully recovered, you're not going to get the best bang for your buck. So I don't want to call it a wasted session, but you're not going to get adaptations as quickly and stimulus that you want as efficiently.
yeah,
So at least 48 hours, I'd say, between sessions, if possible.
yeah. I think I definitely agree with that. Um, yeah, I think the warm up is important, like the way you feel, like, and I guess going off that too is like you could start a set and be like, I really don't feel like I have that pop, and then I would just scrap that session and
Mm-hmm.
try, like implement some low end stuff, or to rest and do it another day. But yeah, I think like just listening to your body or knowing, and then even like within a set of like say you had five, whatever we're doing, depth jumps or whatever, a high end thing, or a box jump or like a seated jump, and you felt like you weren't getting the like, what's your thoughts on like pushing through? Okay, the first one's the highest, and then you're like, okay, same height for the second one. Third one's a little bit lower. Fourth one, I'm barely getting up there. Like, would you just scrap it and try to just
Yeah.
keep those as like, you don't want to have junk. I guess I don't know if it's junk
Junk
volume.
reps.
Like,
Yeah. Junk
yeah, like
volume.
it's like, okay, I'm not getting the pop. Should I just keep grinding these out? I think people miss that as well.
Yeah, I think pivoting away, because ideally most good plyometric sessions go, for me at least, my best jump or my best sprint is like the in the middle. If I have a set of five, like my third or fourth one is like the best one, and then the last one I can kind of feel the like drop off, and I'm like, okay, we're all set. If your first one's your best one and it just keeps descending rapidly, then you need to just probably scrap it and go with, all right, if you were jumping on a 24-inch box, go with like a foot. Like just chop it way down and just do something low intensity if you want to get it in, and then move on. Call it a win for the day. Trying to push through something and like you're not going to be able to like summon some random strength or athleticism from the ether just by pushing through, as most people in the gym are like, I can just put my mind to it and I'll be able to lift it. With plyometrics, it's way different. Like you're not going to just manifest athleticism out of nowhere. It's just not there for the day, so you got to scrap it.
Yeah, I think you watch people grind out reps on a bench or a squat, or and you're like, oh, okay, they're gonna push through, they get through that sticking point. That's not where you want to be in plyometrics.
No, fresher the better.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, okay, I'm gonna grind out this rep. It's like you're just stop.
Yeah.
That kind of brings into, or maybe you can add to it, or go to a different route. But what's the most common mistakes people make with plyometric training? And we've touched on a bunch, but
Yes, I mean, shoe wear. Shoes the most important. Whatever you wear on your feet. No, it just too much too soon. It like people. I'm glad people get excited about plyometrics, but I see them like immediately go into 40-yard sprints, depth jumps, and single leg bounds, which are some of the most high end plyometric stuff you can do. And within a week, if not days, you see them like, oh, my hamstring exploded. Like your body's just not ready for that. So too much too soon is the number one mistake I see. The second biggest mistake is just not understanding like what plyometrics are and how to implement it. So that's kind of two things, but like a standing box jump is not technically plyometrics because you're not like applying force into the ground quickly. Like you're standing in a static place and jumping up to it's building power, but it's not really a plyometrics exercise. And again, that gets into the nuance of like what's plyometric versus what's training power,
But if you
etc.
did like a pogo hop into a box jump,
Pogo hop into a box jump, that's plyometric because you're,
right?
the bounce, the force of application.
Yeah.
So even just understanding that, because you'll see someone doing box jumps and they think they're doing plyometrics, but they're not. And then they're getting annoyed because their box jump or their vertical is not improving because they're not really, you're training your jump. You're not training your plyometrics. So those things go hand in hand. But if you're leaving one out, you're not going to improve your springiness, your bounciness.
Because the
So
plyometrics, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, is more about the landing, absorbing landing force.
yeah, ground contact time. Like
Where
how
in
much
a
can you
box
apply
jump,
in a short amount of time?
yeah, where a box jumps you're jumping on, you might be bending your legs to land. You're
Mm-hmm.
not absorbing all your force, and essentially, like you get more out of jumping, or plyometric wise, you get more jumping off the box. Which, like, I don't know if I agree with jumping backwards off a box, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing rebounding box jumps, like those might be, it's more of a plyometric than
Yeah,
just standing there and jumping in a box.
yeah. That's exactly right. And um, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole too much, but there's been a big in CrossFit. I know you don't follow it as much anymore, but like a massive increase in Achilles injuries all of a sudden, like people blowing out their Achilles, and it's because a lot of reasons. But I mean, they don't do enough plyometrics, so their body's just not ready for that stuff. So when they try to do things like a rebounding box jump or absorb those forces in an athletic way, yeah, they can all snatch 275, but a plyometric jump is way different. And all of a sudden your Achilles snaps and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? I thought these people were super fit.
Yeah, I
But
think that goes into the volume as well with that.
there's, like I said, there's a lot of factors, but if you don't train plyometrics at all, you shouldn't be surprised when you do something that is applying insane amount of forces to your Achilles that it doesn't want to handle it and it explodes. Um, and that's not to, I mean, I don't want people getting hurt, but sometimes it's kind of like, what are we doing here, people? So back to the question. Sorry, I got sidetracked there a little bit. Biggest mistakes: too much too soon, not really understanding like what plyometrics are, and then not having a plan. Like they want to do plyometrics, people want to do plyometrics, which is awesome, but then they just throw a bunch of crap at the wall and then hope it sticks and hope it works. Like you really need to have a progressive plan of in building on um, all the different pieces needed so that you can safely do plyometrics and not set yourself back by doing plyometrics with an injury or overuse and things of that nature. That's
Do
the
you
big
think,
ones I see.
yeah, do you think with like ankle, knee, hip, is there like a mobility like standard you'd be like, oh, make sure you're, or something you look for in like, okay, you should be able to have your knee over your toe, like in a, you know, I don't know, a squat,
So
or like, or I don't know if you would put any like,
what? Yeah, well, so what's fascinating about it is actually like if you want to get down to the science and the brass tacks of it, like some of the best, most explosive people don't have great mobility because stiffness is good when it comes to plyometrics. So super mobile people you would benefit actually from plyometrics, but they might find that they feel a little less mobile, which maybe isn't the worst thing. Like if you're hyper mobile, that means you have almost like no stiffness in your tendons, which isn't going to be great for your athleticism or your if you want to be bouncy and springy. It's not to say there aren't people who can jump high and run fast who are super mobile, but if you start doing plyometrics, you might notice like I'm not like that guy over there is super springy and he just got off the couch, but he can't touch his toes.
yeah.
Like that, so it's a weird balance. Like I wouldn't say that there's a mobility requirement. What I would say is like there is like a tendon, ligament, and joint like resiliency requirement. Like you need to build yourself up to be able to do those high end plyometrics by doing isometrics, by doing low end pogos and deep tier stuff, so that you're able to absorb the forces without putting yourself at risk. But that's actually made me think of that, like the mobility thing. It's an interesting question because
Yeah,
it
it's
actually
funny to
doesn't matter
see.
that much.
It's funny to watch the guys at like NFL or NBA combine who jump the highest. They don't like necessarily move. Like if you watch them move, you'd be like, oh, that guy like his toes are out, or like he kind of like walks funny, and it's like he just like
Yeah.
you can just jump to the moon, you know?
Yeah. They're just built. They're like a rubber band pulled taut. Like they're just built. Their whole body is just like a doing. Like they're so stiff.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's great. I think people need to follow a specific program. I think it's very important to for plyometrics. I think most training. So if someone wanted training, where could they find you, Mickey?
Where could they find me? They could find me at the Dad Bod Chronicles on Instagram. And where could they find you if they want to find out about your big broken toe and your Grinchy shirts
Oh, geez, all the good stuff. JP Wiz on Instagram.
and training, of course? Before we get off, one quick question. Where are you with your plyometrics right now, JP? I'm just curious. Are you sprinkling it in, or are you? I know the big toe makes that tough, so you don't want to be going crazy.
No, I always do some form, like even our conversations before or after during the podcast, kind of always like opens up my mind to like, oh, I could be adding way more plyometrics in. I think it's in the warm up a little more low end. I think I need a focus on high end plyometrics. And I think it would be a good time of year for me to do it just because I'm not like chasing the weights a little bit. It would be a good like thing to add in. I feel pretty fresh. I want to stay fresh. And I think like, I think by adding the right dosage in, those high ends would be good. So yeah, I think it's always opens up my mind to be like, what things can you add in? What things can you change in your training and experiment with? So I definitely have room for improvement in my plyometrics training.
And plus, you don't have. I got snow down here right now, so my plyometrics scope is narrowing down what I can get done in my garage because right now I'm not doing any sprinting in the road because I'll eat it. All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening, and if you want to check out any of our stuff, JP Wiz and the Dad Bod Chronicles. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.